Hi, and welcome back to the Style POV. Today, my guest is Hannah Poston, writer and content creator known for her reflective and grounded take on beauty and fashion. If you've seen her channel, you know she treats getting dressed as a daily practice, not a performance. In this episode, we dig into the big question, like what is personal style and why does it even matter? We explore how taste evolves over time, the balance between investment pieces and the spark of novelty, the knowledge gap that makes style feel hard for many people, and practical ways to translate inspiration into outfits that fit your real life. We also talk about separating internet style from actual lived style, and how to hold both joy and intention when getting dressed. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hi, Anna. I am so excited to welcome you on Style POV. It is wonderful to have you. You have been such a requested guest. I just wanted to jump in and do like a broad question that I think a lot of people wrestle with. And I think that you are such a good person to ask this to. So if you'll indulge me, why do you think personal style matters?
The main question.
I know, it's big.
But I also want to say
broad.
thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm
Yes.
really excited to be here. And that's such a great question to kick it off. And I think about this all the time. In fact, I feel like I'm starting to move my YouTube content in the direction of always trying to answer this question obliquely, either a little bit or a lot in almost every video that is about style or fashion that I make. So I really think about it a lot. I have been talking a lot on YouTube lately about the fact that your clothes are touching you all the time. They're on your body, they're with you all of the time. This is sort of the most granular, physical, immediate answer to the question. You simply can't escape the question of personal style, whether you think it matters to you or not, whether you're interested in the theory of it or not, whether you're trying to be an artist of your own style or not, because a lot of people aren't and totally don't care, which I think is absolutely fine. But even those people can't escape participation in the crafting, whether it's active or passive, of a personal style. And I think it disgruntles a lot of people who don't care about it or think they don't care about it, are afraid of it, are ashamed of it. And by it, I mean excitement about style or active participation in it. A lot of us have troubled history with fashion, with our bodies, childhood baggage around how we present ourselves to the world, what we wear, and trends and all of that stuff. A lot of people have baggage around it, you know? And again, like everyone's putting on clothes. Pretty much everyone. Most people are getting up in the morning and putting on clothes, and from an almost mind-boggling variety of positions, participating in the lived art form that is fashion. So it affects you. Yeah. It affects whoever you are, it affects you. And then when you meet someone and you interact with that person, it affects that person. And again, a lot of people, I think it's subconscious for them. They're not thinking a lot about it. And they say they don't care and they prioritize other things, but it's still there all the time, kind of in the way that your manners matter. Whether you make eye contact and smile when you see someone on the street, or the way that you treat the person who is checking you out your groceries, or if you're the grocery checker, the way that you interact with the people whose groceries you're checking out, just those little details of the way that you kind of show up for people, whether you have a developed relationship with them or not. It's always there. It matters because of what it is.
Absolutely.
It matters because of that, because clothes are on your body. So it's like the super immediate answer. I think when you zoom way out from there, that's the most micro answer. The most macro answer has to do with coming at it from the opposite place, right? You zoom way out and you kind of ask, why does it matter? It's kind of like, why does it matter when there are so many terrible things going on in the world? Why does it matter when it's frivolous and there's so much else that's important? Well, because it's on your body every day, it affects sort of the way that you show up in the world.
Yeah.
I think that when you ask, why does style matter in a judgy way, or when someone says like, oh, that's frivolous or it doesn't matter, it's kind of a way of saying the big picture issues in our world and the worst griefs and the tragedies and I don't know,
I think we don't always have to put it against all of the things. This is like our own personal space, right? And the world is going on around us, and we can care deeply for causes. We don't have to say style is important and it is as important as X, Y, and Z. You know, style is about intention, right? Like what I was hearing you talk about, like intention. Like some people are very intentional about it. They wake up and they have this thought, and this is why they're into style systems or transitioning their style or learning about their body, their colors, all these things, because they want to put intention behind it. And other people, whether this is a false sense of like carefreeness or rejection of style, they say like, I don't care what I want to wear. I don't care about it, right? In fact, there's like a Misha Prada quote that says like, I'm tired of these people who say they don't care. I'm going to butcher the quote, but basically because they're putting on clothes on their body. They are actually still communicating, whether they intend to communicate or not. And as you so astutely pointed out, it's how you're interacting with the world. It's how you're talking to people, like how you interact with the grocery store clerk. Are you saying like, hi, how are you? How's your day? Or you're just like grunting, like, you know, like your clothes are kind of giving off the same things. And maybe you want to be the person who grunts. Maybe you want people to just like not come against you at all. And that's like what your clothes are doing for you. They're kind of like style armor. So when I say like, when you were talking about like, how does it matter when all these horrible things are happening in the world? They're happening and we should care and we should get involved and we should pay attention and gain knowledge. But that doesn't mean that we have to have a hierarchical scale of this is what's important and this is what's not important, because style is tied to our identity. And in my opinion, by lessening your own identity, you're lessening your voice in the world. You're lessening your impact. You're lessening your ability to go out and hopefully change things to make it better, right?
Yeah. And I think maybe in a way that's even less direct. I mean, the way I sign off my YouTube videos is by saying, take extra good care of yourself so you can be the most effective version of yourself.
Yeah.
It's sort of trying to make a connection between taking care of yourself and being able to then be effective at doing something that hopefully has a larger impact. Mm-hmm. But I think there's something even more sort of diffuse and just energetic going on, which is that joy in the everyday does matter. You matter, and the way that you feel matters, period.
Yeah,
You know,
it
like
does.
this is a strange, difficult time to be alive. And one way to look at it is to say, yeah, take care of yourself so that you can be a force for good.
Yeah.
But it's also true that it's okay to foster joy in the darkness because the other option is to not.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you can choose. You choose between taking care of yourself, trying to stay connected to what is beautiful and delightful, and in some cases, yes, frivolous, and then also knowing that that a lot is dark. It's like you're holding both at once. Mm-hmm. Or you can choose just allowing the darkness to completely eclipse every waking moment of your life. And those are kind of the only two options. And I feel like it's that balancing act where you make space for joy just because. Style, I think, for a lot of people is part of that. And it's okay. It's not just okay, but I think can be a really lovely act of almost like fostering the spirit to allow yourself to do that. And then it does impact other people because it changes who you are.
Yeah, I mean, my big tagline is find strength through style. Like, I think we find a lot of confidence, a lot of belief in ourselves, a lot of identity, a lot of the ability to take up space by finding our personal style. And that's an interesting question too, like style as the global thing, like this is something that matters, but then how do you diffuse it down into something that's like personal style? And that's like what a lot of people who watch our channels are going to be wrestling with, like what is personal style? How do I get there? How do I transition from this style that I was told I should wear to a more personalized version of it? And is that the biggest goal? Is the biggest goal in our society, in the style world, in the style personal journey, let's call it, is it to personalize your style? I'd love to hear your thoughts on like that kind of personal style journey.
Yeah,
idea.
That's so interesting because I think part of me has probably internalized that messaging, that is the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
And it's so tempting for certain personality types, certain kinds of artists, to think that there's like an end goal. and that we're trying to get there.
Yeah.
Perfectionists, essentially, right? Trying to polish the self and the work to the point that it is done and perfect. And it's like a lifelong project of mine, and I think a lot of people's, to resist that lie and to kind of, I constantly reminding myself there's not actually a destination of like the finished self, the finished perfect wardrobe. It's just day by day. And to go along with that, I think of myself as somebody who's a little bit more sort of constantly evolving and dynamic stylistically than a lot of people who I encounter in the style space. There are a lot of people out there in the style world, beauty space, who just seem to have always had a really clearly defined sense of their own style. And it maybe evolves a little bit, but just a little bit. You know what I mean? Like going from a square to a square with slightly softened corners.
Yeah,
just like
exactly.
really little. But overall, everything's very aligned. Everything's very sort of, clearly issuing from the core of who the person is, and they never have questioned it. It just seems like everywhere I look, people are like that. And I'm over here like, if you just go 3 years back in my YouTube videos, I look like totally different, like makeup, clothes, everything. I just have had these sort of wild pendulum swings of personal style, even since I started making content 8 years ago, which is sort of embarrassing to be up here like talking about style. And then if you look back into my history, I seem to be someone who doesn't have that much of a grasp on it myself.
No, I have the same journey too. I think when you find so much joy in fashion too, and like so much excitement in the aesthetic combinations and creativity involved, you really kind of end up being a person who like jumps in, you're like, there's something kind of cool and interesting. Like, let me try it on for size. And like, the more you learn about yourself and the more like, I love the idea of thinking about style not as a static thing, that even when you're rounding those corners, it's still an evolution. You're still kind of like tweaking the recipe. And it just depends if you're like tweaking the recipe, like you're going from chocolate to vanilla, or are you just like adding in a little cinnamon for a little spice? I was someone also who was like chocolate, vanilla, strawberry next year. Like, who knows? So
yeah. It's not just random. If I were to chart it, it definitely is informed by the phase of life that I've been in, all these different sort of phases of personal style, my own personal growth as a person, like how happy I am with myself, how settled, how much I feel like I need from fashion or style. It's all connected to lifestyle and life path, but just much rangier and more dynamic than maybe necessarily everyone's is. And then I think there are a lot of people like us out there too.
Yeah, I think there are. Yeah. And like, so what would you say is the difference between, so we're in a culture right now that like is heavily into trends and fast fashion and like, kind of turning over those closets so quickly that the element of personal style isn't necessarily connected when you try those trends, because you're like, okay, this is the new aesthetic. I'm going out to buy this aesthetic. I'm trying it. I'm copying this outfit. This is what I'm wearing today. Next week, it's a different aesthetic or a different color. So how do you think those two things adjust? Because I don't personally identify as like a fast fashion or trend focused person where I'm trying every new trend. Did you feel that way, or how would you parse those two things out?
Yeah, interesting. My whole life, I have been interested in this question of how much trends actually affect the psyche of sort of a sensitive or artistic person who's interested in fashion on a deep level, as opposed to, I think there are two ways of interacting with trends, right? There's that way, and then there's a way where you're chasing trends because you want to feel like you are on trend. Like you're in. You feel almost like there's a hole you have to fill. Like you're trying to satisfy something. It comes from anxiety, or it comes from needing to belong or needing to be seen a certain way. I think trends often get quite a bad reputation because of that way of chasing them. Oh, I have to have the latest thing so that people know that I'm cool and so that people know that I'm clued in, right? So there's that, of course, but that comes from knowing intellectually that something is on trend and then choosing, being like, I'm going to get that and wear it so that I will have joined the party and I will be seen to know what is cool. There's this other thing, the first thing that I was talking about, I've observed throughout my life that I will slowly come to think that something looks good or looks fresh, a certain silhouette or a certain color that I know that a year or two ago I didn't think looked good.
I have that too.
It's like my own way of seeing slowly changes, and it feels very organic to me and it feels very real.
Mm-hmm.
What it kind of feels like is that I am plugged into something with that everyone who's paying attention kind of is. That
Mm-hmm.
there's like a level of aesthetic sensitivity, and that if you have your feelers out, we all sort of start to pulse with the same understanding of how
Mm-hmm.
things look or how things should look, or what's exciting. It's actually something that feels political sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we as a culture are starting to take Gen Z fashion, for example. We are starting to be less precious about bodies looking exactly a certain way. We
Mm-hmm.
are starting to be less obsessed with polish. Our pants are getting looser. Our socks are getting dorkier. We're starting to lean into this kind of I don't care what you think vibe. And
Mm-hmm.
there's sort of a loosening and an appreciation for thrifting. There's an
Yeah.
aesthetic that goes along with that. That's like you look like you got your clothes at a thrift shop.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things feel like generational turnover in terms of worldview, like what we
Mm-hmm.
value. And that is all good. All of that is good. That's like moving in a more liberated direction, in a more environmentally conscious direction. To me, that's about like what the next generation might be able to bring to the table in terms of
Mm-hmm.
healing us.
Yeah.
But that's trend, but that's like a decade. That's like a trend that takes place over the course of a 5 or 10 year period. That's not the
Yeah.
same as like
A
the
micro trend.
like the micro, exactly, the micro trend.
It's like a big trend cycle of this is what the generation views fashion as. This is like the overarching voice of that decade. Like I grew up in the 90s and 2000s, and like the rhetoric around fashion was like kind of not great. Like a lot of
No.
it was pretty harmful to women's bodies and their views of it. It was like, like we were nitpicking celebrities for like tiny ounces of belly fat. It was like crazy, right? And the messaging around that was very much you have to be this size or you're not perfect for the fashion world. We got a lot of that messaging, and I think we're still kind of healing from that to a
Yeah.
certain degree. I love that you brought up Gen Z because I think they really are kind of bucking the system a little bit with that and saying like, why don't we just do what we want? And that's their voice right now, is kind of like, why don't we just put a personal lens on this? You don't have to wear a suit to be viewed as professional, and you don't have to blow dry your hair every day in a perfect coif to be the ideal woman, or whatever that picks out. And it talks about where we're going with style. Like personal style matters. We've all seen a big push to that between like dopamine dressing and then on the other side, all the style systems. Do you think there's like a world where these two things can merge together? Where do you think we're falling apart when we're either swinging the pendulum all the way to like the strict system and they're like, I can never wear capri pants again, versus I don't care at all. I'm just dressing to find joy. Like, is
That's
there.
interesting. Yeah, it's like personal style in theory is liberating, or in theory is empowering, but then often the systems that we are stumbling across and using to try to find our own personal style are constricting.
Yeah.
Before we get away from the topic of the 90s, though, I just
Yeah.
wanted to say something about that, because when you were describing what it was like culturally in the 90s and early 2000s, the sort of cultural narratives around fashion and from fashion, it made me think that what I was experiencing during that time was a scorn for fashion that I was sort of taught by my family
Okay.
because of those issues. I received this really powerful messaging at that time that to care about fashion, care about personal style was kind of to play into the hands of the patriarchy, and that it was sexist. All of fashion, everything about it. And it all kind of got conflated in my mind because I think it was sort of taught to me that way. That if you wear a pair of high heels, you're just doing it for men. And
Yeah.
like that any kind of constructed femininity was a problem and was like indoctrination.
Mm-hmm.
But in a weird way, it was too black and white right? So
Yeah.
I grew up feeling like it was shameful to care about personal style. I really did. I've talked about this here and there, but maybe not in terms that are this clear. So for me, what's been going on over the course of my lifetime since then is this teasing out, separating of personal style, how it can matter and what it can add to a life from the harmful messaging of the fashion industry, especially in the 90s and early 2000s. But those harmful messages still continue in the
Oh,
fashion
yeah.
and beauty world, and kind of trying to keep the good parts and reject the bad parts, which I think are sometimes the same motion. Like it's done in the same motion. And talking about Gen Z, I think some current trends are actually that motion. Like in
Yeah.
one fell swoop, by choosing to wear something or do something, you're both caring about fashion and rejecting that which is harmful about fashion. I really love to see that.
So in the 90s and 2000s, we had the magazines that said like, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do
Yeah.
this, or like, this is in, this is out. And like, don't be caught dead in stripes for fall. It was very like shaming almost. And I think that's where we all kind of got those fears of being out of style too. Those magazines really made you feel being quote unquote out of style or wearing a passing trend was like, oof. Like everyone's going to be laughing at you.
Yeah.
But now we've like tapped into style as a form of expression. There are different goals for different people. I feel like we have like dopamine dressing and more like a Gen Z approach of just like, I like it, so I wear it. And then we swing over here and we have the people who are like, I don't know what looks good on my body. I don't know how to dress. So I'm going to use a system like Kibbe to
Yeah.
figure out my body shape and figure out how to wear clothes that are harmonizing with me. And they don't have to be on opposite sides of the spectrum. I think there is a world where they can be merged. But how do you think people are approaching these and like how are they impacting the style world right now?
Yeah, it's funny that for some reason, the thing that's coming up hearing you talking about this is just the fact that people are coming from such different starting points with aesthetics when they decide to embark on the project of their own personal style. I personally am coming from a place of having always cared about it and always noticed it, meaning like I was screaming and crying at the age of 2 because the blue spinning dress was dirty and I couldn't wear it. My first sentence, literally the first sentence that I said was, you want the buckle shoes, or I want the buckle shoes, because my mom was trying to put sneakers on me and I wanted to wear like the shiny fancy shoes that, it is just like bred in the bone. Like I have always cared. And so my personal style journey started like the day I was born. I started trying to figure out, I started responding to what was the clothes on me, noticing the way that it made me feel, how I carried myself, what it made me want to do in the world, and trying to kind of use those tools to affect the way I moved through the world. It was innate, you know what I mean? And some people, I think, just do not have that chip, and they get to a point as adults, literally, where they kind of look around and are just like, I've never put any effort and energy into this. I feel completely out of my depth when I try to figure out what to wear, but I know that it's dragging me down because I don't know. And it's not that it's dragging them down because they think they don't look good. It's like they start to notice that they don't feel good. People sort of come in through the back door of what we were saying at the very beginning about why style matters in the everyday. And so there are those two positions, and then there's everything in between. There are like shades of both of those things. And so where you are on that spectrum is really going to affect which tool is best for you. I think somebody who already has kind of a passion and an eye and has maybe been experimenting, just the idea of dopamine dressing might be the only thing they need. Or like the concept of reading about it is just like, oh yeah, I love that. And they could just completely lean into just wearing something because it makes them feel good. And that's the only thing they ever need. And nobody needs to tell them otherwise. Somebody who's way on the other end of the spectrum might really need a system like Kibbe or something like, or the archetypes or something, just to even begin to navigate the waters, to even begin to think about the concepts of proportions and color and the vibe of clothes. And in that case, it can be a really helpful tool, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting when you're talking about this too, because it made me think about the knowledge gap kind of, because I truly believe that like anyone can have great style. And we can debate what quote unquote good style even is. Is it for you? Is it for the spectator? There's tons of different approaches. But as a blanket statement, anyone can be good at style. It is not just something that's like bestowed upon you by the gods and like you go about your life and you're like, I'm great at style. Guess you're not. You know, it's not a talent per se. It's something you cultivate. And what I think is interesting is when we look at it through this lens, some people just naturally, like you and me probably, like when I was the same way when I was really little, I would have like, I need the parasol and the puffy sleeve dress and like the tights that matched. If I didn't have a tutu on, I was like a very sad person. I was very invested in that personal expression at a young age. And that filtered through my life, you know, so I was always paying attention to it. I was always examining shapes and styles and fabrics. And, you know, obviously we both ended up in fashion. So like, you know, there was a passion of ours.
Yeah.
But on the other side of it, when we look at it this way, there's a knowledge gap, right? People who were not paying attention to it. When you say like, oh, that jacket has a nice fit in the sleeves and it's proportionate in color and it suits my body, people are going to be like, I don't see that. Like, I don't understand how you put those things together and why when I do the exact same outfit, it's not coming off the same way. It's like, I'm a terrible cook. And everyone loves to tell me, this recipe is really easy. You just do 1, 2, and 3. And I'm like, yes, but I don't know what 1, 2, and 3 looks like. I don't know when to take that piece off the oven and transfer it into the stove or do whatever it is. And I think a lot of people suffer from that knowledge gap. And that's where the systems have started to come into play.
It just makes me think about this thing that happened. I haven't thought about this in so long, but I feel like I had that knowledge gap because I didn't grow up in a family or kind of community that cared about aesthetics or fashion. Also, I spent part of my youth overseas. And so I feel like I didn't get sort of a cultural education in style as a kid or even a young adult, which a lot of people do, especially these days with the internet and stuff, you know, like with social media, it's like you can really pursue information that you're not getting from your family. But that wasn't true when we were kids. You know, it's like the TV or the films that you watched with your family, the exhibits that you went to, or the shows that you went to, or what your parents talked about, like all of those things would really, really influence what you did and didn't know about the world. Nothing that I absorbed at that age had anything to do with fashion at all, just the family that I was born into. I just remember this moment. I think I must have been in 7th or 8th grade, or maybe even older. I might even have already been in high school because I remember I already had access to the internet in 7th and 8th grade, but I bet I was in 9th grade when this happened. I had a really good friend named Sarah who was so aware of fashion. Just the way she would talk about it, not in a trend following way, but historical fashion. And we would be talking about something and she would say, oh, it's so 70s, or like the dress that's such a 40s silhouette. And I just remember sitting at home one day and thinking, Sarah has all of this information about vintage style and what was popular in what decade. And I was like, I don't know any of that. How did she learn that? I don't have any sense of like what a 40s dress is as opposed to a 30s dress or hairstyle or any of that. And what happened was I looked it up on the internet. Like very early use of the internet, but I looked it up and I found like this long blog style, you know how websites were back then,
Yeah.
like, you know, terrible design, scroll. But it was like just sort of a survey of, this is like pre-Wikipedia. Wikipedia would have been very helpful. Long sort of survey of style through the decades between the late 1800s and 90s. And I just read through and I was like, oh, in the 30s, this happened. And then the 40s, I like learned it. I just educated myself. I mean, it was just sort of like could have gone and gotten a book out of the library, but that was the way that I did it. And then I knew. And then I knew what Sarah had known. It's just so about the knowledge gap.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
You know,
and
it's
filling that in. So let's talk about that because I also grew up like the internet was coming about and it was like a whole new world, but it's nothing like what it is today. You know, I remember loving Sienna Miller's style and having like 5 paparazzi photos of her to access. Like that was it. There was like 5 photos of her style and I was like poring over them, trying to figure out the proportion details and what made them so like free and cool. Nowadays, access to information is almost unlimited. How do you think that's like helping or hurting people's style journeys? Like,
wow. I mean, it's hard. The thing that's almost inconceivable is the way it's affecting the style journey of a young person.
Yeah.
Because by the time I got to this point where I could access all of that imagery, I had gone through many phases of dressing, experienced a lot, and I'm building on that. It's just hard to imagine what it would be like for somebody to be building a personal style as a teen with so much access to imagery and sort of maybe the empowerment that comes with that. Because what you get from that kind of access is you see people doing things and you're like, oh, that's possible.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you can do that. You can have that attitude. You can wear that. The only resources that I had, like you're talking about those paparazzi photos, were sort of like the other people I went to school with or knew maybe outside of school, and then a little bit film, television, media otherwise. And I just felt like I was groping blindly towards, or what I would come across in shops. You know, I would like go shopping and I would see something and be like, maybe that's me. But I didn't have like a zoomed out sense of the entire world of possibilities for style. And I think it's much easier to have that zoomed out sense now.
I was going to say, I think that this kind of ties into like the dopamine versus the style systems. And obviously there's a way to merge them, but those two kind of opposite ends of the spectrum too, because it's like you're given so much information, right? Like any celebrity, you want to find out their style, what they wore to this event, what they wear to the gym, you can find it out. Any style system, you can deep dive in it. They've taken on a life of their own. I remember you talked about that in your video about Kibbe. And it was so interesting to me because I feel like we have so much access, so much information, so much inspiration. And yet we still are all in that messy middle too. Some to varying degrees. Like we've already lived a lot of trends. We've kind of, at least I feel like I figured out like, okay, that one's this system isn't for me. Don't need it in my style toolbox. But this one is really intriguing and maybe I'll learn to appreciate a new silhouette in a different way. Or this celebrity's outfit was really compelling. I want to kind of figure out why. And you can find a video on that specific outfit detailing, you know, I don't know like what we're getting at here, but how do you think all this information and all this access and all this knowledge is impacting the evolution of our styles? Do you think we're like transitioning more our styles because we're getting new information all the time? Do you think it's like the rectangle to the rounded corners? Or do you think, how are we approaching fashion? Is there even a forever wardrobe?
It's incredibly overwhelming. Wow, it's so interesting that these questions and what it's making me think about, because you and I both also make content into this space.
Yeah.
Like we are also contributing voices, piling on on top of all of what's overwhelming. But
I do think we're trying to help people sort through it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah,
That's the goal.
Right. I mean, I think in all of this, I feel like I'm trying to stay grounded. There's sort of the idea of fashion, and then there are the clothes themselves. You know, Ezra Pound said, the idea of the thing and not the thing itself, or not the idea of the thing, but the thing itself.
Yes.
You know, it's like not the idea of style, but clothing itself, like what it is you actually put on your body and how it actually impacts your day-to-day, the moment-to-moment life that you have. How it impacts both interpersonally and kind of in terms of identity, but also how it impacts that practically, like how you move physically through space and what you're able to comfortably do, and sort of trying to integrate those things. I think about my work on YouTube as sort of trying to help sort of the valuable parts of what's floating out there in this fashion ideas cloud down to the ground and sort of make them concrete and actionable in a way that's realistic and translatable for everyday life. Because the thing about the internet is that it's like not real. And like clothes online, what people are wearing, even photographs of street style, like all of it is just all digital. It's all just like floating out there. And so much of what we do in our clothes goes unseen. By anyone, or by anyone other than our like spouse and child, or you know, family or classmates at school or whatever it is. But there's not that many people compared to what happens in the digital space. So someone has to take this sort of stressful, overwhelming miasma of messaging about fashion and style, everything from the dopamine dressing through to the systems, and help people to actually act on it.
Yeah.
I think that that's what I'm trying to do.
No, absolutely. And I get that. Like, I feel the same way. Like, I'm not trying to tell people this is the one way you have to dress and this is the one thing you have to do to have good style or this is what good style is. I think we're both trying to filter out processes that work for people to determine that for themselves, to like find that empowerment. But what's interesting too is the part where you talked about like the digital and how that's like doesn't always feel real and that kind of fantasy version of style versus the day to day. And I think that's causing a lot of people like the access to all that imagery and the belief that this is actually how their lives are lived and this is what they wear every day is really making people feel bad about their own styles too. And I think that's like a disillusionment a little bit of the internet is like, you know, you see a creator, like an influencer or something, and they show you the day in a life of, and they wake up and they have a toddler and they look perfect and they've blown out their hair. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, you know, but like as someone who has had a toddler, it is really hard to look perfect every day. Sometimes you do just grab like your crappy jeans and a sweatshirt and like got to get to daycare. You know, that's what you do. And there's this kind of like ephemeral quality of these videos we're seeing on style. Like, this is my style for the week. Well, that was also your job to create that week of content.
100%.
Like you know, so of course you can spend time crafting the perfect outfit and spending 45 minutes tweaking the balance or proportions or colors and videotaping it versus the average person who might not have that time. And now they're feeling like they're not stylish because well, Tuesday and Friday's outfits were a complete fail and they just like wore the same outfit and it wasn't even a good one. So, you know, I mean, how are we handling personal satisfaction with style and kind of like removing the curtain a little bit from this like polished, even if it's not polished like it was in the 90s or polished like coiffed hair and suit, it still is this like almost unachievable aesthetic to a certain degree.
Yeah, and I mean, personal satisfaction, it's like this question, who is it for?
Yeah.
Who is it for? Because any content creator, especially the content like what you described, it's for the content, it's for the viewers, it's for show, but it's also for work. It's like the work, is it being for show? Any celebrity, it's for the paparazzi, it's for the photo shoot, it's for show. It's again, it's like for work and it's for show. But if that's not your work, then it's like, who is it for? Right? It's for yourself. That's the answer primarily. But then also you have to go maybe to work or you see people in your daily life potentially, maybe just a little bit if you're just dropping your kid off at school, maybe a lot if you go to school yourself. And so it's for those interactions, you know, but that is such a massively different purpose and kind of purposing of style than style for content creation. And yet so many people are created content for inspiration. And so it makes this kind of like broken loop. And I think that that is something that it's really hard to get one's head around. Like, it's hard for me to get my head around it as a content creator. It's something I try to talk about on YouTube from time to time and think about a lot. And I hope that we, as time goes on with, you know, style and the internet, will get some language for this.
Yeah.
We'll come up with a way of phrasing. Usually every generation these new terms come up, new sort of ways of talking about things that actually represent philosophical ideas, like shifts in the philosophy of the way that we think about our lives. And I hope that we'll start to get that about this issue so that people can be more aware of it.
Yeah, I think that we just have like a little bit of a disillusionment when it comes to what successful style means. And some of our examples are, and this has been true forever, is the worshiping of celebrities and influencers who maybe just, that's their job, you know, and maybe we shouldn't be comparing our 9 a.m. running to daycare and then work outfits to the person who's, you know, had 2 hours to kind of craft this and like 10 people doing their hair and makeup. Like, it's not the right reference points. So what would you tell someone, because like trends are accelerating our style growth a lot, right? We're getting new information all the time. We have access to everything. Like, how do you discover a personal style? Is it through frameworks? Is it through lived experience? Is it through looking at daily outfit photos? Is it through just like feelings? Like, what do you think is the North Star for style right now?
I talk a lot about image sourcing in my videos, but that's also really effective for me particularly. And I'm a really visual person. I feel very inspired by what I see. I feel like the knowledge gap, which constantly is opening up again, especially if you don't live in a city. I think if you live in a big city, you're like walking around in a Pinterest board. When I go to New York City, I'm like, whoa. I feel like my sense of what's stylish updates like my system updating. You know what I mean? Like, I go to sleep
13
and I
to
wake up the next morning and
13.1.
like,
Yeah.
like I've like leveled up, So if you live in somewhere where you're seeing kind of it happen in real time, that's effective in its own way. But if you don't, it's like there's always a knowledge gap in terms of what is happening globally, like what's fresh. And I don't necessarily mean like what you need to buy, like new clothes that you have to buy to feel fresh, but just styling, which isn't the
Yeah.
same as the clothes that you buy. It's just the
Yeah.
way that you style, the way that you sort of put together what you have. So for me, sourcing images and saving them and looking at them, kind of revisiting them, it fills in that knowledge gap. And it's not necessarily images of what people are wearing now. It's like, it's a way of checking in with what I might be interested in starting to wear, like the way that I might be interested in evolving my own styling of the things that are in my wardrobe might I be the most interested in pulling out. It's like just poking around, seeing images, and I see something and I'm like, oh, that looks really good to me right now. Like that looks
Yeah.
really fresh to me right now. I'm going to dig out that red dress that I haven't worn in a year because all of a sudden I'm into it. But I feel like that I learned that by looking at images more than I do even by playing around in my own wardrobe.
Yeah.
Definitely more than I do by shopping.
Well, it sounds like a little jolt of creativity. Have you ever seen those brain scans where something like lights your brain up?
Yeah.
You're like going through the images being like, does this light my brain up? Like, am I inspired by this? Do I see something new? And all those images, what I love about the process you're describing is one person may look at an image and be like, nah, not for me. And the other person would be like, oh, this is the image I've been searching for. This is what's lighting me up. Now I see that red dress in a totally new light and I'm going to take it and infuse that internal creativity that I have. And that's why I think so much of style is tapping into that internalness. Like I love the frameworks. I love the like fundamental fashion knowledge that can help you take that source of inspiration and actually transform it into an outfit that you love, because it's not always just like a copy and paste method. Like that doesn't always work, right? We know that that's not always the most successful route, but it's like, how do you take that inspiration, that creativity spark and really make it just speak through you instead of speaking for you?
Yeah. Visual images are really effective for me because, again, I'm a very visual person. But I think another way, like a more intensified, broadly applicable way of talking about what I feel like I do with image sourcing is just thinking about people who you admire and not even necessarily for their style. Just like think about who you're trying to grow into or who you're hoping to grow to be more like. Just think about the vibe of that person, the sort of aspirational vibe. And then from there, slowly start to connect it to fabric and color and overall appearance. Oh, I really admire Michelle Obama, like the way that she moves through the world. Like somebody like that, where you're just like, yeah, I aspire to have some of these qualities of somebody. And then you think, okay, well, what does she wear? And then a lot of what she wears maybe isn't right for me. But what of the things that she does wear, what of those things does make sense for my life? And then you slowly start to construct a version of like a future self.
Yeah.
I have this amazing Tara Brach meditation. She's like a Buddhist teacher called a calling on the future self, where in the meditation, you imagine like going to your home, going to meet your future self at her home and sitting down with her and having conversation with her. And I think that's so effective for the inner self. Think about your future self. Like, how does she dress? What is she's really gotten herself together. How does she dress?
Yeah.
I think there's so much that can be gleaned from that.
I think I have a version of that I've called like the future day exercise. And you kind of walk, like visualize your future day, what the elements are around you, what's your day like, what's your coffee. It's like just an expansion of where are you now and where would you like to be. But what I think is really interesting too is like personalizing it. Like I'm also a visual person, but I also really love storytelling and narrative and writing. So I love to think about
Mm.
like playing on something that's a passion for me and then combining it with those like fashion foundation principles like textures and lines and shapes and all these things that can help you transform them. For me, it's like write a character and like who is this person? Look at their clothes. Like if I had nothing but their clothes to
Yeah.
go off of, what would this person do? What would I feel about them? How would they be moving through the world? What would they be communicating? And or looking at someone that you admire, like you take Michelle Obama, like write a little narrative, like not even using her, just like if you looked at her, what would you think her life would be like? And then say like you pull out like strong, independent, powerful, and then you might go and extend it further to be like, well, what fabrics exude that? Like maybe a
Yeah.
heavier weight fabrics, maybe bolder prints, maybe bolder colors. And even if you don't have the exact same proportions or the exact same height or whatever
Yeah.
physical qualities of Michelle Obama, you could still take that and say, well, how do I make bold patterns or heavier fabrics work for me to communicate
Yeah.
that same powerful dynamic? And I think that's why our audiences have so much overlap, is because we both talk about just like taking that big upper fashion level cloud and pulling out the pieces that really make sense for them. So, what do you think personal style teaches us about our identity? Like, let's just like end on a big question too.
I mean, I feel like the only appropriate answer, especially given what we've talked about for me at this time, is that it has taught me that it's okay to keep changing and that there's not a perfect, ideal, settled self that will someday sort of be your arrival point.
Mm-hmm.
I think the relationship between evolution of style and the desire to have pieces of clothing that will last for a long time or
Mm-hmm.
potentially last forever, I think that is a really lovely metaphor for the self and for identity. We as people keep changing over time, but there are things that are constants that you
Mm-hmm.
can depend on, that you keep with you as you evolve, and that are sort of like your wardrobe basics that
Mm-hmm.
you can invest in because you feel really confident that they're going to stay stylish for you over the next 10 years. I think nobody would argue that that's true of people's personalities, people's identities. It's like there's a
Mm-hmm.
core of yourself, but that it's also healthy to try new things and to go out on a limb once in a while. Like that's healthy both in style and as a person.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the thing that I have the hardest time with is not the stability part, the like
Mm-hmm.
collecting wardrobe pieces that will be relevant forever part. It's accepting kind of radical evolution instead of buckling down and just staying the same and being perfect. There's some part of me that tells me that I should do that second thing, and I just can't, never will, you know?
No, I don't think you should. Now I want to talk about something because I think it's such an interesting phrase, radical evolution. Like what does that mean in style? What does that mean to you in style?
By that just now, I think I meant swinging from one end of the spectrum to another. So kind of
Mhm.
going from being a maximalist to more of a minimalist is kind of
Mhm.
like what happened to me. One thing I've been thinking a lot about lately is kind of moving from the desire for a level of polish through to wanting more rugged edges or a little bit more like grunge
Mhm.
in outfits or in my appearance, a little bit more sort of outdoorsy quality, but still fashion, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, like that. Sometimes I am into one thing one year and then I feel like it's the very opposite of that thing the following year. And so that feels radical because it's a
Yeah.
huge swing. And yet, I have so many pieces in my wardrobe that I've continued to wear throughout all of those phases.
Do you think that radical evolution has to always be aesthetic based, or do you think it could also just be the internal process or kind of like your experience with style, where you go from like wrestling with it in the morning every day to being like, well, I'm using the same pieces, but I feel so good about my style now?
Yeah, totally. That feels radical to me. I think that kind of evolution can change your life.
Yeah.
Literally, like it just changed everything about how you move through the world and how your day goes. So that absolutely is radical.
Yeah, and I think it tends to be like our cultural relationship with style a little bit too. Like as a culture, we have voices as we talked about before, and then we kind of learn to either shed those or amend them or learn to speak through them in a way that's more identity driven or more personalized or one that feels good. One last kind of topic I wanted to broach a little bit, because we talked a little bit about trends, is just like, what do you think about the rise and fall of like certain aesthetics? Like you talked about how you swung from maximalism to like a little bit more minimalism. And I think that speaks a little bit to the broad fashion culture, or the, you know, kind of hierarchical, this is the fashion gods are telling us this. Like, do you have any thoughts on those kind of aesthetics and the shifts that we go through?
Yeah, I mean, I think minimalism has been trending for a long time for a reason that has to do with overconsumption on a massive scale and the hunger for less that is bubbling up from deep and underneath our sort of shared experience. So I think that talking about trends being like micro to macro, I feel like this is even like bigger than all of that. But I think that a hunger for less or for a level of simplicity doesn't necessarily need to mean aesthetic minimalism, like strict aesthetic minimalism.
Yeah.
And I think that it's taking me a while to sort out. I definitely have that like craving for less and for simplicity. And I also have an appreciation for aesthetic minimalism. And it's taking me a while to sort of sort out the percentages. How much lifestyle minimalism do I need? How much do I need to declutter to be my most functional and happiest self? And how aesthetically minimalist do I want my wardrobe and my home to be for me to feel my most functional and my best? This is just my lot in life. But the way that I'm sorting those things out is by going to the extreme and then having to scale back, you know? So it's like, just like, especially with aesthetic, you know, I had a year or two there where it was just really only ever wore like two colors in a single outfit. And this year, I always wear more than two colors in an outfit pretty much. And my handbag and my shoes never match. I really sort of like went to the extreme, and now I'm tiptoeing back and hopefully we'll arrive at a good median point.
I know. I think we're all struggling with that. I felt that too, where I look at my closet, I'm like, I have too much stuff. And I don't know where to start. We're all like the collective voices right now are saying there's like capitalism that's still telling us to buy, but like a lot of people are internally feeling this need to like hone down on what makes them happy, what works for their lifestyle, what functions for them. And it doesn't have to be a wardrobe with like 200 pieces.
It's also true that aesthetic minimalism has a weird relationship with wealth.
Yeah.
Most aesthetic minimalist pieces look expensive.
Like the row and the Kate,
and
you know, like.
Yeah. And so as I kind of leaned into that, because I'm so attracted to minimalism and just in art, you know, like modernist and postmodernist, it really is like an aesthetic thing for me. But the more I leaned into that in fashion, I crossed a point where I started to feel a little bit uncomfortable with almost often kind of like looking richer than I am. It almost felt like I was kind of sometimes cosplaying like being a rich person, which I like never have been and never will be, you know? But there's like a trick you can do. If you just really lean into the minimalism and polish, suddenly you look like, especially on camera or on social media or something. And I was just like, this is terrible. Like, I'm not into that. You know, I really am drawn to the aesthetic of simplicity, but I'm really not into cosplaying being a rich person.
Yeah.
And it's actually kind of hard to do one without the other. So I think lately I've been asking myself, like, well, what does an aesthetic minimalism that isn't that look and feel like?
Yeah.
That's what personally the big kind of style question that I'm on the edge of right now. What elements can I introduce or pull back out of my closet that have been there for a long time to keep the loveliness of the calm of a pretty minimal style, but to introduce some like grounded reality, some comfortable kind of grunginess to make it align more with like the actual life that I'm living.
Yeah. Well, it's like if you gave 4 different artists the exact same thing to paint in the same paint tubes. Like, you want to take that. You do want to draw that painting, right? But you want it to be your way, your brushstrokes, your style, your little tweaks, your little nuances and flares. So it's like, it's still all the same painting. Everyone's painting that sleek, beautiful minimalism. But what do those words actually mean? Like, how are you filtering it through your own bodily experience, the fabrics, the balance? And I get that that's a lot of people's goals right now. And that's where people are like struggling. We have so much inspiration, we have so much knowledge, but how do we figure out what that means to us internally, authentically? Like, how do we dress with intention, taking inspiration and finding our own voice through that? And that's why we're so lucky to have content creators like you.
I try.
No, you ask so many good questions and you really explore systems and trends and the philosophy and value system behind style. And I think that like that's why people resonate with you so much, is you do pull from the cloud and make it these threads that we can all say like, yes, I want that thread in my style toolbox, or I want to weave that into my style. Let's end on a fun question. What is your favorite thing in the fashion kind of zeitgeist right now? What's just like lighting you up? Even if it's not for you, like you're like, you don't have to be like, I would wear this. What's just something that you're seeing and you're like, that's awesome?
My most recent YouTube video that went up was about the like fall runway styles. And so there are so many to choose from on there.
I know.
But I was kind of like, oh, I'm kind of into this. And like,
we will make sure that video is linked. So you can, you can tease that. No, just tease it then.
Well, to tease that video, I can give a 2-part answer. Classic. Okay. I have like a 5-part answer, 5-paragraph essay. I'm just kidding. Yeah. But so one thing that springs to mind from that video is talking about one of the sheer fabrics have been trending for a while, but specifically sheer to the point of like looking naked, which I am not going to be wearing like a completely sheer dress to the point of looking naked, like outside the bedroom. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not talking about me wanting to walk around in clothes like that. But I do love sheer fabrics. And I talked a bit in that video about how I think that the sort of envelope pushing aspect of very naked dressing or very sheer dressing, it touches on something that really I appreciate about high fashion, which is that sometimes it can kind of undermine, it sort of like pokes at what makes us uncomfortable as people and as a society, and like opens up space for us to maybe question whether our knee-jerk reactions to things are the way we want to be or not.
Yeah.
Knee-jerk reaction is like, that's too much nipple, too much body. And it's just like, well, why do I feel that way? What, I don't know. It's like introducing some nuance and friction, and I really like that. But for me personally, it's like, I like the barn jackets. I just bought a pair of some good walking shoes that'll be good for my feet. And I have experimented with various things over the years and found that like barefoot shoes, you know, those shoes, like not with the weird toe outlines, but just shoes where it's like you're barefoot, really strengthen my feet, especially for like long-term walking. So I just bought a pair for walking in like the winter and the rain, and they kind of look like old school hiking boots, almost like vintage hiking boots. And I'm so excited about them. And it's funny because for years, my walking shoe style would have been like the bright white dad sneaker, like the like Instagram minimalist girl polish. These are like the total opposite of that. They feel very Gen Z to me. They feel a little bit dorky. They feel really like a bit woodsy. And I'm like so excited to wear those to go walking because they're going to be good for my feet, but I'm also excited about the way they're going to look.
Yeah. Okay, I just love your 2 examples too, because the first one was like, I'm never going to wear it, but I love sheer and naked dresses. And then I'm going to wear hiking barefoot boots for
hiking barefoot, I know.
Yeah, it's perfect. But it shows how we can appreciate things, how we can admire things, and then how we can totally swing in the opposite direction and be like, but this is actually for me. This is what I want in my day to day.
If I was going to a gala, maybe not a totally naked dress, but I would get some sheer on.
Yeah.
It's just, this is what I'm talking about with practicality.
Yeah.
Lifestyle. It's like, what about what's zeitgeisty now? Because I do think that the hiking boot is a bit zeitgeisty right now.
Probably.
Which zeitgeisty things are going to really feed me
And what am I actually going to be pulling out of my wardrobe? Because I've done it too, where I do buy the sheer dress because I'm just so in love with the idea of it and the messaging and the vibes. And I think I would wear a sheer dress out. And then I think I don't have anywhere to wear a sheer dress out.
Yeah.
Like, unless I'm showing up to like my friend's like 7 p.m. dinner hang, like in a sheer dress.
Exactly.
So it's like, it doesn't mean you need to suppress your creativity. It just means there needs to be a balance of form and function, right? Like
Yeah.
that is design. That is the design of fashion design. That is the design of personal style. We are not on the cover of Vogue just shooting a really pretty picture. We're living in these
Yeah.
clothes. And to circle it all the way back to what you said, they're on our bodies. To a certain degree, it's a bond. You're wearing these clothes out into the world, and it's that bond for your day. Like they're doing something, forming something for you as a functional standpoint, protecting you from the weather, keeping you clothed, allowing you in stores. But they're also communicating something. It's just that perfect balance of like, are they communicating what you need in your life? So,
Yeah. Talking about radical evolution, I think that when I allowed myself, especially having grown up in a household that was just didn't value this.
yeah.
Like when I started to allow myself to do it, which was when I was basically like a senior in college. Like it took me a long time to come around. I started wearing red lipstick and like heels. And that was like a radical evolution for
Yeah.
me. It really was at that time because it represented an embracing of the truth of what you just said about it being a bond and it being actually meaningful and it being okay. I was allowing myself to foster that and to care about it and to put energy into it, no matter what anyone else might think.
Yeah. And I love that you just said that too, because I was thinking about like red lipstick and the way I used to wear it versus the way I wear it now. There's like an ownership evolution with style
Yeah.
too, or with something. It may start off as a trend or as something you were told to do. And maybe part of you is still a little tied to that. But then as you go and as you evolve your style, you learn like, this is the way I want it to show up for me, not in the like 1950s pinup style, but in the quirky bright spring style that I've evolved, So I just think it's so interesting. Our conversation and personal style matters. And it's been so wonderful talking to you. I will make sure that everyone has a link to your newest video and all the wonderful content you create. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. It's been amazing
Thanks,
chatting with
Gabrielle.
you.
This was so fun. Yeah, I
Okay.
love talking about this stuff.
I know. I like that we can nerd out on fashion and
I know.
festivals and go and all these weird, wonderful tangents.
It's delightful to have this kind of large, big picture, abstract discussion, but I also feel like we could literally do a whole episode just talking about like what's interesting in current trends. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we could come back. We could do another video and be like, let's talk about these micro trends. Let's dig into it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Anytime.
Okay. It's a date. All right. Thank you guys so much. And until next time.